Hello everybody, my name is Mario5514 and welcome back to another Splatoon Talk video. In this video we're going to be looking at some more what-if patch notes for Splatoon 3, for patch 10.2. You guys liked the last video that I've done, so here's part 2 for you all. Keep in mind these are only what-ifs of what we would like to see instead of what Nintendo will give us. And if you end up enjoying the video, hit the like button, and if you end up liking the video, consider subscribing, and let's get started. So first up is the 96 gal. As first thing we're going to do is that we're going to decrease its ink consumption by approximately 8%. So it's going to go from 2.3 to 2.1%. So it's going to get like 3 more shots on a full tank before having to refill. We're going to increase its droplet rate from 3.4 to 4. So it's going to be painting more effectively. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 11.3511 degrees to 10 degrees. And then we're going to decrease the max frequency in which bullets shoot towards the outer reticle from 30% to 20%. 96 gal has had a history of terrible RNG as well as other problems that I've had in the past, some of which started back from Splatoon 2, as well as in Splatoon 1. They did improve over time, but I think we can make it even a little better. Try to make it more bearable, though at the same time hold the RNG to the weapon as a weakness to it. And so I think making a few changes to make the weapon more bearable would be nice, though at the same time we want to have the RNG be like a noticeable weakness on 96. Though I think these changes would make 96 more usable outside of being like a niche weapon. It's almost turning into like that. I mean, I rarely see 96 being used, given that Ink Vac was recently buffed, so we could see the regular model being used. The cooler one is actually a nice one, which I hardly see most of it though, because it's overrun by like pencil or other cooler weapons. As well as the 96 gal Deco has a very nice Kraken niche for like Rainmaker, which Kraken does very well with. Alright, next up are changes to Splatter Shot. So first we're going to decrease its ink consumption from 0.92 to 0.9%. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 11.66 degrees to 10 degrees. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 4.86 degrees to 4 degrees. We're going to increase its droplet rate from 1.5 to 2, so it's going to be painting more. And then we're going to decrease the distance between droplets from 9.2 units to 8.5 units. So I think Splatter Shot just kind of struggles with the shot deviation, like the shots spreading out. So making it so that the shots don't spread out as much, though at the same time painting a little more with the droplet rate buff. And having more ink to use, like having more uptime, I think could make shot more supportive, as well as more of a fighting weapon in certain situations. Given that the regular Splatter Shot's a very good Zuka weapon, the most dominant one right now. Tenatech Splatter Shot's more of a niche weapon as it's overshadowed by Neo Splash. And then the Ember Splatter Shot's a very solid Kraken weapon, though Kraken's only seen use in Rainmaker. It has seen some use in Tower Control, though it does have more knockback when it's on the tower. Though I think these changes would make Splatter Shot more usable. And at the same time, I think Splatter Shot will be good from here after these changes. Alright, next up are changes to the H3 nozzle nose. So for all 3 weapons, we're going to decrease its ink consumption from 2.08 to 1.8%, completely reverting the nerf that it got nearing the end of Splatoon 2. We're going to increase its droplet rate from 3 to 4, so it's going to be painting more. We're going to increase its shot velocity from 2.875 units to 3 units per frame after 4 frames. We're going to increase its effective range from 15.06 units to 22 units. And then decrease the distance between droplets from 6 units to 5.5 units. I think H3 would benefit a lot with these changes, and looking at H3 nozzle nose, the weapon series has very solid kits to work off of. It's just the main weapon struggles to see use. It's a main weapon problem. So giving these changes to the main weapon would definitely make it feel more bearable. Not to mention it could see some more uses outside of being like a niche weapon, like we've seen with H3D having Wall and Big Bubbler, and the Barazuchi H3 with Suction Bomb Tri-Strike. So I think these changes would make H3 more bearable in the long run. Is it going to be one of the best midline weapons? No. Is it going to increase its viability as well as make it more relevant? Yes. I think these changes would benefit H3 very much if they were to happen. Alright, next up are changes to Squeezer. So for both weapons, we're going to increase its droplet rate while pressing ZR, basically its burst fire mode, from 1.5 to 2, which we're going to be reverting the nerf it got in 6.1. And we're going to increase its shot velocity while holding ZR, basically its painting mode, from 2.3032 units to 2.65 units per frame. I doubt this will extend the flight distance, though at the same time I don't really know for sure if that will increase its range. But I don't think we're going to be increasing its range anytime soon. And then we're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground while holding ZR by approximately 17%. So it's basically the same buff that shot and zap were given in 4.1, getting their shot deviation buffed. So yeah, we're going to give that same buff to Squeezer. So its painting mode is going to be more accurate with the shot as a trade-off with the, or as like something as a, kind of like something to help with its shot velocity buff. So yeah, I think these changes would be nice for Squeezer and having it see a little more use. Though at the same time, it's rarely going to see use, given with the regular model, it's just its Trizuka output is too high. I think it can go a little lower. And Foil Squeezer rarely see use, given that there are other screen weapons that do better than Foil Squeezer. Though I think these changes would make it more usable in certain situations, and Squeezer is just more of a niche weapon than it is like a usable fighting weapon. Alright, next up are changes to the NZAP, to both the 85 and 89 model. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 4.75 degrees to 4 degrees. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while in the air from 12 degrees to 10 degrees. We're going to increase its shot velocity from 1.4495 units to 1.75 units, and then increase its droplet rate from 1.4 to 1.5. I think these changes would benefit Zap much better, given that the last known changes that Pencil was given was back in 9.3, and I don't think if Pencil's not gonna get nerfed, then we should buff the other weapons that have Tacticooler. And I think Zap and H3 are some of those weapons. I think for the shot velocity buff, I think Zap's range will be slightly longer, though at the same time, it's still going to get outranged by Splatter Shot. Though I think Zap would be able to fight more than just spamming its special. I think it's a nice change, making Zap more of a fighter, so it's not going to be just a special spammer. So I think these changes are nice in the long term. Alright, next up are changes to the Splatter Shot Pro. So for all three weapons, we're going to increase its droplet rate from 2 to 3, so it's going to be painting more. We're going to increase its shot velocity from 3.833333 units to 4 units per frame after 3 frames. We're going to increase its effective range from 15.06 units to 23 units. And then decrease the max frequency in which bullets shoot towards the outer reticle while jumping from 40% to 35%. So I think Pro is going to benefit a lot with these changes, being able to paint more, having longer range, and having less RNG having less jump RNG. So I think Pro is still going to be viable, though at the same time, you'll still be running at least one main of Intensify action to mitigate the RNG issues that it still has. Though it's just going to make Pro more of a supportive option, or in some cases, it could be a fighter if you're looking at the regular model, which has Crab Tank. So I think these changes would benefit a lot for Splattershot Pro in the long term. I really do. Alright, next up are changes to the 52 gal. Yeah, I definitely think 52 should get some quality of life changes, though at the same time keep making sure the weapon is not going overboard. So we're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 6 degrees to 5 degrees. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 12 degrees to 11 degrees. We're going to increase its droplet rate from 2.4 to 2.5, so it's going to be painting slightly more. And then finally, we're going to decrease the max frequency in which bullets shoot towards the outer reticle from 25% to 20%. I think 20% would be the lowest for most shooters. I think if it goes below 20%, you're basically getting to the point where you have to give the weapon nerfs as a trade-off for having less RNG. Though at the same time, I think 20% would work for the shooters, given that the shots are still gonna deviate towards the outer reticle, though it's not gonna be as often that you see the shots deviating. So I think these changes will put 52 in a better position. And overall, I think it's going to make it slightly less gear dependent, though you'll still be running at least one main of Intensify action if you end up jumping with 52 gal. So I think these changes are nice, and I think that's all that 52 should get. Alright, next up are changes to the L3 nozzle nose. So for all three weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping by 50%. So it's going to go from 6 degrees to 3 degrees for its shot deviation when jumping, since that's one of the things that L3 did not get buffed in when you look back at Splatoon 2, compared to H3, which did get buffed. So I think going from 6 degrees to 3 degrees would definitely be a huge change for L3. We're also going to decrease the distance between its droplets from 12 units to 11.8 units. We're going to decrease the max frequency in which bullets shoot towards the outer reticle from 25 to 20%. And then finally, we're going to increase its droplet paint radius from 1.55 units to 1.6 units. So we could finally put L3 in a very solid position, though it's not the main weapon. It's not the main weapon that struggles. It's more of a kit problem, like we see with the first two models, like the regular model having Curling Bomb, Crab Tank, and L3D having Burst Bomb and Ultra Stamp. Though the Embers L3 having Splat Bomb Inkjet is definitely one of the best kits that we've given L3 since Splatoon 2, which had Burst Bomb and Inkjet on L3D. So I think these changes would make L3 more usable, though at the same time it's more of a kit problem. Though I think making L3 more usable, making it see more use in the game, I think would be nice. Alright, next up are changes to the Carbon Roller. So for all three weapons, we're going to decrease its zinc consumption from 3.96% to 3.5%. We're going to increase its horizontal flick damage from 100 to 125. Same thing to its vertical flick, we're going to increase it from 120 to 125. So I think Carbon Roller is going to have a better chance of fighting. It's going to have more uptime, and it's also going to be able to get its special a little faster without having to refill your ink tank as much. Though looking at the current kits, people are not going to use any of the Carbon Rollers more than Carbon Roller Deco, which has Burst Bomb and Trizooka. Though I think for the other two, I think they could see a little more use, though at the same time, they're probably going to be like niche weapons. Which the Barazuchi model is definitely going to be like a niche weapon, and the regular model is rarely going to see any use. I don't think it's going to see any use anytime soon, though I think these changes could push it up to seeing use a little bit. So I think it's nice there. Alright, next up are changes to Dynamo Roller. So for all three weapons, we're going to increase the angle in which horizontal flicks deal maximum damage from 14.5 degrees to 17 degrees. So the angle is going to be wider. Dynamo Roller is going to have a better time fighting, and it's also going to be able to. It's going to have a wider. It's going to be able to hit people much more effectively than before, which I think is nice. We're going to decrease the amount of time it takes to pick up the weapon when performing a horizontal flick by 1/12 of a second, or by 5 frames. So its horizontal flick will be 5 frames faster. I think that's one of the things that Dynamo struggles with. And then finally, we're going to decrease its ink consumption from 18% to 17%. So it's going to have one more flick on a full charge on a full tank before having to refill. So yeah, I think increasing Dynamo Roller's uptime, increasing its effectiveness, and being able to be more of a threatening weapon definitely puts it in a position to move it away from being a niche, though at the same time, it's probably only going to be a situational niche on certain maps. Though I think slightly pushing it outside of being a niche is a good start for it, and I think these changes would help that even further. Alright, next up are changes to the classic Squiffer and new Squiffer. So for both weapons, we're going to increase its damage at full charge, basically its direct hit, from 140 to 150. We're going to increase its range at full charge from 18.25 units to 19 units. We're going to increase its movement speed from 0.03 units to 0.05 units. And then finally increase its minimum range from 10.75 units to 11 units. So its range when you have no charge is going to be even slightly longer, though at the same time your max range at full charge will be longer. So I think Classic Squiffer is going to have more uptime, it's going to be able to fight more. Not to mention it's also going to be strafing, its strafe speed is going to be even faster, so it's able to go after its targets more effectively. And I think being with Splatoon 3, you're in a fast-paced meta, and having more movement speed, I think, would help Squiffer in the long term. Given that Squiffer is more of a niche weapon, and Classic Squiffer just sees more use than New Squiffer, because New Squiffer was mostly overhyped because of the Autobomb Zipcaster kit, which I think Splatana Stamper does Zipcaster much more. It does it more better than Squiffer, to be honest. Though I think these changes could push both of these weapons into a better position. Alright, next up are changes to the Snipe Rider 5H and 5B, or to both of our pencils. So, for both weapons, we're going to decrease its damage from 68 to 65. We're going to decrease its shot distance at full charge from 27.77 units to 25 units. We're going to decrease the width of spray droplets created by shots from 2 units to 1.88 units. And then finally, we're going to increase its damage to Crab Tank by 15%. I think the object damage that Pencil has, I think that's the one thing that Pencil struggles with. So having it so that it deals more damage to Crab Tank, I think is nice for it. But I think these changes here, decreasing its damage down to 65, I think could make Pencil more balanced. Decreasing its shot distance at full charge is something that people have complained about. So decreasing it a bit would definitely put it in a much better position, making it more balanced, so it's not going to be as oppressive. And then decreasing the width of spray droplets, basically, when you're at full charge for Pencil and you fire a shot, and it leaves that line, it's now going to be even more narrow. So I think these changes are going to be toning back Pencil more, though at the same time give it some kind of an object damage buff towards Crab as like a compensation for like its damage nerf. So I think these changes for Pencil are fine, and after that it'll be good as is. I think these changes would finally put Pencil in a position to where it's balanced, though at the same time it's a powerful weapon, though at the same time its power has been toned back a lot. Alright, next up are changes to the blaster. So for all three weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping by approximately 25%, so it's going to go from 10 degrees to 8 degrees. We're going to increase its shot velocity from 0.945 units to 0.98 units per frame after 9 frames. So its range is going to be slightly longer, though at the same time, it's still going to get outranged by Range Blaster or any of the other blasters or any other weapons that can have longer range than Blaster, though I think it's a nice change for it. And then finally, decrease its ink consumption from 10% to 9%. So Blaster is going to have a little more uptime, it's going to be less gear dependent, and it's going to be able to take a fight more effectively or more easier. So I think these changes are nice, and I think Blaster could use a little bit more, though at the same time will probably be fine as is after these changes. Alright, next up are changes to the Range Blaster. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping by approximately 25%, going from 8 degrees to 6 degrees. We're going to decrease its ink consumption by approximately 10%, going from 11% to 10%, so it's going to have 2 more shots on a full tank before having to refill. We're going to decrease its cooldown after firing before refilling its ink tank by 1/6 of a second, or by 10 frames. So its cooldown is at 70 frames, so after this change it would be 60, so Range Blaster is going to have a little more uptime. And then finally, we're going to increase its damaging explosion area, or its blast radius, by 3%, going from 3.3 to 3.4 units. So for these changes, here's what I have to say here. So for Range Blaster, I think the RNG is definitely an issue that Range Blaster has struggled with for a long time, so buffing it so that it's not as gear dependent on Intensify action is nice. Decreasing its ink consumption is another thing, given that Range Blaster is the most ink-hungriest weapon in the game. It just consumes ink like there's no tomorrow. So increasing its uptime or increasing its ink efficiency I think is nice, though at the same time making it as like you have to be careful and you have to time your shots or aim them right, otherwise you're going to be wasting ink. Decrease its cooldown so it's 10 frames, so it doesn't take as long for you to refill your ink tank after firing, I think is nice. And then increase its blast radius to 3.4 units would be nice, because Range Blaster is a very high risk weapon but can achieve very high rewards. So at the same time, I think 3.4 units is nice for it, given that 3.5 was a little too much, and I think 3.3 was a bit too much off the top for Range Blaster. So I think putting its blast radius at 3.4 units could push it in a position where it's powerful, though at the same time it's toned back to where it's not as oppressive. And kind of like what we saw with Squeezer prior to 9.0. So I think Range Blaster would feel a lot better with these changes, less gear dependent, better ink efficiency. So yeah, more uptime. I think Range Blaster would benefit a lot after these changes. Alright, next up are Luna Blaster and Neo Luna Blaster. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping by approximately 25%, going from 6 degrees to 4 degrees. We're going to increase its shot velocity from 0.8484 units to 0.875 units per frame. So the shots are going to be coming out slightly faster, though I don't know if it's going to affect the flight distance, though I don't think it's going to change at all. And then we're going to decrease the max frequency in which blasts deviate towards the outer reticle while jumping from 50% to 40%. So Luna Blaster's RNG is going to be more bearable when it's jumping, and at the same time it's going to have more uptime, or it's going to see more use outside of being a niche weapon, given that Luna Blaster is hardly being used, given that it's outclassed or just outplayed by Stamper. And of course, Neo Luna Blaster could be a nice hammer niche, given that Ultra Stamp is one of the best that we've given on Luna Blaster. So I think this would actually benefit Luna Blaster a lot after these changes. I think it would push it up a little higher, though at the same time, it's probably not going to change as much. Though I think these changes would make it more bearable, less gear dependency, and just give it more uptime. I think is nice. All right, next up are the changes to the Rapid Blaster. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping by approximately 25% from 8 degrees to 6 degrees. We're going to decrease the max frequency in which blasts deviate towards the outer reticle while jumping from 50% to 40%, same buff that we gave Luna Blaster. And then finally, we're going to increase its movement speed from 0.055 units to 0.06 units. If I'm not mistaken, this could be a 10 to 15% movement speed buff. So Rapid Blaster is going to be strafing a little more, though at the same time, it's not going to be as fast as like some of the other weapons, though at the same time, it will see a lot more use down the line. I think these changes would decrease its gear dependency, especially intensify action, which is something that blasters have struggled with for a long time, is the RNG. So making it more bearable and decreasing its gear dependency and increasing its uptime, I think is nice. So it gives Rapid Blaster something to work with in the long term. All right, next up are changes to the Rapid Blaster Pro. So for all three weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping by approximately 25%, from 8 degrees to 6 degrees. We're going to decrease the max frequency in which blasts will deviate towards the outer reticle while jumping from 50% to 40%. We're going to increase its splash damage from 35 to 40, and then we're going to increase its movement speed from 0.055 units to 0.06 units. I think these changes would benefit Rapid Blaster Pro a lot, given that the new Rapid Blaster Pro could see more use, given that it's a cooler weapon. And of course, Rapid Pro Deco could see more use in dive comps, given its synergy with Angle Shooter, which I find surprising. And I think a splash damage buff would make it more... It could combo with other weapons that could deal between 50 to 70 damage, and I think that weapon would help that out a lot, given that Burst Bomb and I think Stamper would benefit a lot with these changes, as well as with Slosher. So Rapid Blaster Pro splash damage can turn some weapons from like a 2-shot or to from a 3-shot to a 2-shot, or possibly from a 2-shot to a 1-shot. So opening the door for Rapid Blaster Pro to combo with other weapons, I think is a nice change there. Decrease its RNG so it's more bearable and not as gear dependent, I think is nice. So I think opening the door for opportunities for Rapid Blaster Pro is nice, and I think this would help it a lot, especially for the new Rapid Pro, which is our new cooler weapon that could rival or compete with Pencil. Alright, next up are changes to Mini Splatling. So for all three weapons, we're going to increase its droplet rate from 1.6 to 1.7. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 4 degrees to 2.5 degrees. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 8 degrees to 6 degrees. We're going to increase its movement speed while charging from 0.072 units to 0.076 units. And then finally, decrease the distance between droplets from 10 units to 9.5 units. So I think Mini Splatling is going to feel a lot better with these changes. It's going to be able to fight more. It's going to be less gear dependent. And you're also going to be able to paint more, given with its droplet rate buff. I think Mini Splatling would benefit a lot with these changes. Decreasing its gear dependency when it comes to intensify action, though I doubt people are going to be jumping with Mini Splatling, though if they are, I think it's a nice change for anyone who's running intensify action on Mini Splatling. And I think increasing its movement speed while charging, I think is nice, given that it did get a movement speed buff when it's firing, so doing the same thing when it's charging I think is nice. Gives it some kind of an edge, so it kind of makes the weapon more of it moves at a faster pace, given that I think it will help Zimmy the most, given that it's another popular weapon to see use in dive comps, with its bubble output being very consistent. So I think these changes would help Mini Splatling a lot in the long term. I really do think so. Alright, next up are changes to ballpoint Splatling. So for both weapons, we're going to increase the effective run speed up from 25 to 30%. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground in long range mode from 1.5 degrees to 1 degree, reverting the nerf that it got in 6.1. We're going to increase its shot velocity in long range mode from 2.21915 units to 2.4 units per frame after 8 frames. So its long range mode is going to have slightly longer range, which I think is a nice change for ballpoint. So it's able to fight more so it's going to be able to fight more when it's at a distance, as well as being able to keep its distance in certain situations. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 4 degrees to 3 degrees. And then finally, increase its short range damage from 28 to 30. So the changes I made for ballpoint are basically increasing its viability, making the weapon more bearable to run in comps, increasing its uptime, and the short range damage buff I gave it makes its short range mode more consistent with its long range mode. Given currently that its short range does 28 and its long range does 30, so having the short range mode more consistent with its long range mode makes the main weapon consistent altogether. So I think that's a nice change. I think making run speed up more effective on it is nice, given that it was an unnecessary nerf done in Splatoon 2. Some of these nerfs were made, some of the changes that I've made were reverting the nerfs from Splatoon 2, which is something that you'll see later. Though I think increasing the viability of ballpoint is nice, because if Inkjet doesn't get buffed, then we can give some power to the main weapon, which is to ballpoint. So in case Inkjet doesn't get buffed, ballpoint can still ride solo, even if without the Inkjet buffs. I think it could see more use in the long term. I could definitely see this happening, though at the same time, I don't think Nintendo would want to buff ballpoint. Though I think these changes are nice in the long term. Alright, next up are changes to the Nautilus. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 3.3 degrees to 3 degrees. We're going to increase its movement speed while charging from 0.04 units to 0.06 units. We're going to increase its movement speed while firing from 0.07 units to 0.08 units. And then decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 3.6 to 3.3 degrees. I doubt people are going to be jumping with Nautilus, though if they are, I bet Intense Fire Action is going to be nice on it, and it's going to have less RNG issues. I think Nautilus is going to benefit a lot. Not only is it going to be able to hold a charge when it's submerged, but it's also going to have a faster movement speed in case it needs to keep moving, in case it's like too risky to submerge and then re-emerge and then fire. So I think the movement speed buff definitely gives it some kind of a compensation in certain situations. So I think the changes for Nautilus will be good. Alright, next up are changes to the heavy edit Splatling. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 3 degrees to 2.5 degrees. We're going to increase its damage from 26 to 28. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 6 degrees to 5 degrees. We're going to decrease the max frequency in which bullets shoot towards the outer reticle from 30% to 25%. The changes I made to heavy edit Splatling are to increase its viability, increase its comboing with other weapons, and make it so that you don't have to be as gear dependent in certain situations. So I think these changes are going to make edit more of a viable pick. I think the damage buff is nice, given that its damage is kind of lacking, so making it do 28 damage could definitely give people the incentive to use edit a little more, though people are going to be running pencil over edit, though I think these changes would put edit in a better spot than it is right now. Alright, next up are changes to the Tri-Slosher. So for all three weapons, we're going to increase its movement speed from 0.066 units to 0.07 units. We're going to increase its range when jumping from 10.45 units to 10.65 units. And then decrease its frame cooldown after firing before refilling your ink tank by 2/60ths of a second, or by 2 frames. I think Tri-Slosher would feel a lot better with these changes. It's going to be able to fight more, and it's going to have a little more uptime, which I think is nice for Tri-Nouveau, given that it only gets like 2 coolers a match, or it's only going to be seen in double cooler comps. Though I think Tri-Nouveau and the other Tri-Sloshers are going to benefit a lot with these changes in the long term. Do I see it happening? I don't think so. But I think it's nice to give Tri-Slosher something to work with. Alright, next up are changes to the sloshing machine. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease the interval between continuous swings by 3/60ths of a second, or by 3 frames, partially reverting the nerf that this weapon got in 4.0, making it more bearable again. We're going to increase its movement speed from 0.07 units to 0.08 units, reverting one of the nerfs that it got upon Splatoon 2's launch, which I found unnecessary. We're going to decrease its ink consumption from 9.2% to 8.4%, so it's going to be more ink efficient, being able to fight a little longer. And then finally, we're going to increase the radius of ink coverage when the center of a shot hits the ground by roughly 8%. So when you throw a glob of ink, the projectile goes in the air, and when the projectile hits the floor, it basically leaves a huge dot in the floor. So the coverage of that will be 8% larger. So I think that's a nice change for Machine, make it more supportive for its team, and give it something to work with and make it more bearable. So I think these changes would benefit a lot for Sloshing Machine. Do I see it happening? Unfortunately, no. But I do see the continuous swing buff happening if Nintendo decides to do so. Alright, next up are changes to the Dually Squelchers. So for all three weapons, we're going to increase its damage from 28 to 30. We're going to decrease its ink consumption when rolling from 8% to 6%, give it more ink to use in turret mode. We're going to increase its shot velocity from 2.3 units to 2.65 units per frame after 5 frames. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 4 degrees to 3 degrees, and decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 8 degrees to 7 degrees. So I think the damage buff, I think, is very nice for it, especially if you're looking at the Ember's Dually Squelchers, given that 2 shots deal 56, screen does 40, and you're left at 96 damage. So making it deal 30 damage instead of 28 makes it that 2 of the shots deal 60, screen does 40, and it makes Dually Squelchers a 2-shot rather than a 3-shot. So I think increasing its uptime, increasing its viability, and making it so that it has slightly longer bullets, slightly faster bullets, I think is nice. Giving Dually Squelcher the benefit for any players who use it, I think this could happen. Though unfortunately, I doubt Nintendo is going to buff Dually Squelchers. Though I think it's a nice change overall. Alright, next up are changes to the Tetra Dualies. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 7.4 degrees to 5 degrees. We're going to increase its damage from 28 to 30. We're going to increase its movement speed from 0.072 units to 0.085 units. So it's going to be moving faster when you're not performing a dodge roll. We're going to increase its shot velocity from 2.21 units to 2.4 units per frame after 4 frames. So the bullets will be coming out slightly faster without increasing its flight distance or its range. And then finally, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping from 12.8 degrees to 11 degrees. I think Tetras are going to feel a lot better with these changes, given the fact that the damage buff, I think, is going to help a lot in the long term. Given the blast radius from Reef Slider deals 70 and Tetras dealing 30 instead of 28 makes Tetras a 1-shot instead of a 2-shot. So Tetras are going to be a lot more... Dark Tetra Dualies are going to be more threatening with the change. For the Light Tetra Dualies, I think it could benefit a lot, given with the recent buff that Zipcaster has been given that its 45 damage radius is increased by 9%, giving Light Tetra Dualies something to work with and making the weapon more of a 2-shot or a 3-shot than like a 4-shot in some cases. Given that the 45 damage radius, I think, was not big enough, so making it slightly bigger gives Tetra something to work with and makes it a 2-shot than a 3-shot. So I think these changes are nice for Tetra, and I think this is fine from here. Alright, next up are changes to the Splat Dualies. So for all 3 weapons, we're going to increase its shot velocity from 2.37 units to 2.4 units per frame after 3 frames. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while in the air from 7.5 degrees to 6.5 degrees. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 2.5 degrees to 2 degrees. And then finally, increase its ink consumption by approximately 11%, going from 0.72% to 0.8%. That is kind of like a trade-off to offset the shot velocity buff. So I think Splat Dualies are still going to be effective Slayer weapons, though at the same time you have to be more careful in how you're using them, given that you're now more ink hungry than before. Though I think these changes would put Dualies in a better position, or it'll just keep them as is, just make them better, give them quality of life changes. And I think it'll be fine from there. That's all they'll get. Alright, next up are changes to the Glug Dualies. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its ink consumption from 8% to 6% when you're rolling, so you have more ink to use in turret mode. We're going to increase its shot velocity from 2.8115 units to 2.835 units per frame, without affecting the flight distance. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 3.2 degrees to 2.5 degrees, and then decrease its shot deviation while jumping by approximately 25%. So yeah, the shots will not be deviating. I think it'll go from like 8 degrees to 6 degrees, I think. So yeah, I think Glug Dualies would benefit a lot with these changes, make them more usable, outside of being like a niche. Alright, next up are changes to the Dapple Dualies. So for all 3 weapons, we're going to increase its shot velocity from 1.8334 units to 1.865 units per frame after 3 frames. We're going to decrease the max frequency in which bullets shoot towards the outer reticle from 40% to 35%. And then finally, decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 6.8 degrees down to just 6 degrees. I think Dapple Dualies are going to feel a lot better with these changes, though I doubt they're going to be getting these changes. And if they did, I think I think they would be able to fight more effectively, though at the same time they still have to deal with 52 Gal, which is one of the best Slayer weapons right now. Though I think it's still going to make them more usable in the long term. It's nice. Alright, next up are changes to the Dowser Dualies. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its shot deviation while on the ground from 2.5 degrees to 2 degrees. We're going to decrease its shot deviation while jumping by approximately 17%, going from 8 degrees to 6 degrees. We're going to decrease its ink consumption when rolling from 10% to 8%, so it has more ink to use in turb mode, given that with Dowser Dualies you can only dodge roll once, and that's it. So having more ink to use in turb mode gives it something to fight with, and makes it that it's not as noticeable as a weakness. And then finally, we're going to increase the paint radius of shots at the point of impact. Basically, its paint radius is being buffed. We're going to buff it by 7%. So the radius, so the point of impact, so the shot paint radius will be 7% larger on the point of impact. So I think it's a paint buff. That is basically what it is. So I think Dowsers were missing the paint buff. So making it that the paint radius is 7% larger would definitely put Dowsers in a better position as more of a support weapon, or if you're looking at the regular models, more of a fighting weapon. So I think these changes would benefit Dowser Dualies substantially outside of the recent changes that got as a 10.1. So I think these changes would make Dowsers a lot more usable in the long term. Alright, next up are changes to the Brellas for both Splat Brella and Sorella Brella. So for both weapons, we're going to decrease its ink consumption from 5.5 to 5%. We're going to increase its damage from 81 to 85, meaning that its pellet damage will go from 16.2 to 17. We're going to increase its movement speed when shielding from 0.055 units to 0.06 units, and then increase the number of pellets fired from 11 to 12. And I think Brella would benefit a lot with these changes, make it have more damage, though at the same time continue to make it keep it in the support role that it's in, with the recent changes it got as of 10.1. So I think these changes would make Brella more viable in certain situations. So I think these changes are nice for the long term. Alright, next up are changes to Tent Brella. So for all three weapons, we're going to increase the number of pellets fired from 13 to 15. We're going to decrease the amount of time to regenerate the canopy from 5.67 seconds to 5.5 seconds, and I think that's all it will get. And then finally, we're going to decrease its cooldown after firing before refilling its ink tank by 1/12 of a second, or by 5 frames. So it's going to recover its ink 5 frames faster than before. I think Tent Brella is already a solid weapon right now, though making it so that it has more uptime I think is nice, make it more threatening with the pellets that it's now going to be firing. But at the same time, make it as like a weapon that has to be used skillfully, I think is nice right there. Keep it at there. So I think these changes are nice for Tent Brella, and I think that's all that we're going to give it. Alright, next up are changes to the Undercover Brella. So for all three weapons, we're going to increase its damage from 40 to 45, so it could fight more, make it more of a 3-shot, more of an effective 3-shot. We're going to decrease the amount of time it takes to regenerate its canopy from 3.7 units to from 3.7 seconds to 3.5 seconds. We're going to increase its canopy HP from 200 to 250, so it can take more of a beating, though its canopy will still be shredded by Splat Bomb, unfortunately. But we're also going to increase the number of pellets fired from 7 to 9. So it's now going to be firing 2 more pellets than before, giving Undercover something to work with, I think is nice, increasing its uptime, and increasing its viability in certain situations is nice, though Undercover it's still a terrible weapon. Though I think these changes are making it more bearable. Some quality of life changes here I think are nice. And then finally are the changes to Splatana Stamper. So for all three weapons, we're just going to decrease its ink consumption by approximately 10%. So we're going to be slightly reverting the nerf that it got in 4.0, though at the same time we're still going to keep... So the change I made to Stamper is that it's not going to be as ink hungry. So the 30% nerf it got will be down to 20%, which I think is nice. Keep Stamper at a chance where it could actually fight, though at the same time make it that it's very gear dependent and maintain its high difficulty and high reward status as a weapon of power. So I think Stamper getting this change is all it gets, and I think we'll be fine from here. That's all it will get from here. I think it will be fine. Alright, now up to our sub-weapon changes. First up is Burst Bomb. We're just going to decrease its ink consumption on a standard ink tank from 45 to 40%, reverting the nerf that it got in 3.1. So, I mean, if Splash gets an ink consumption nerf, then I think Burst Bomb should go back to 40%, given that it will be an indirect buff to all of our other Burst Bomb weapons, and I think it would be fine from there. That's all we're going to give Burst Bomb. Alright, next up are changes to Squid Beacon. So, first change is that we're going to decrease its ink consumption when using a standard ink tank from 75 to 70%. So it's going to be, so you're going to have more ink to use. Instead of having only 25% of your ink tank left, you're only going to have 30% now. It means that you now have a little more uptime and you don't have as much problem to use ink saver sub as much. We're also going to rework the sub. We adjusted the sub to where it can be used 3 times when used by an ally who don't have them equipped. So basically what that means is if you don't have Squid Beacon equipped, you can super jump to the beacon not 2 times, but you can now jump to it 3 times, so they're going to be more supportive than before, which I think is nice. Increasing its viability and its supportive status I think is nice, especially for the new mini Splatling, which has Squid Beacon. So yeah, I think that's all that Beacon will get, and I think these are some solid changes it can work with. Alright, next up are changes to Splash Wall. So first up, we're going to increase its base duration by 1/3 of a second, going from 6.67 seconds to 7 seconds. We're going to increase the rate of which damage is dealt from half a second to 1/60th of a second, and then increase its damage from 30 to 35 damage per frame. So make it that Wall has more damage, or it has something to work with. And so it makes weapons like 52 gal, 96 gal Deco, and Squeezer, and other weapons that have Splash Wall more of a big deal here. Do I think these changes would happen? I don't think so. Though I think it's something to give Wall something. I think giving Wall something to work with could definitely make it more feasible. Though at the same time, it has to be toned back especially for 52 gal. All right, next up are changes to Ink Mine. So first up, we're going to decrease its ink consumption from a standard ink tank from 60% to 50%, so you could deploy 2 of them at the same time without having to refill your ink tank and then use the second one. So you could just deploy 2 of them at the same time without even refilling your ink tank between those times. We're going to increase its splash damage from 45 to 50, make it more of a 2-shot. We're going to increase its tracking time by 3 seconds. So instead of having a tracking time of 5 seconds, it'll last 3 seconds longer, which I think is nice. And then increase its minimum splash damage from 35 to 40. So it's going to make the sub more threatening. It's going to make it that you're dependent on sub resistance up to reduce the tracking time, as well as decrease the amount of damage dealt by Ink Mine. So I think these changes are nice, and putting Ink Mine in a better position is nice, and I think it'll be fine from there. Alright, next up are changes to Sprinkler. So we're going to decrease its ink consumption using a standard ink tank from 60% to 50%. We're going to increase its high power duration by 4 seconds, so it's going to last instead of 8 seconds, it's going to last 12 seconds. And then increase its damage from 20 to 25, give it something to work with there. So it can make Sprinkler more threatening, though at the same time make it as a sub that distracts your opponents as well as paints the turf that it's placed. So I think these changes for Sprinkler are nice. And last up on our sub-weapon changes is Auto Bomb. So first up, we're going to increase its minimum splash damage from 30 to 50. We're going to increase its base duration by half a second, so it's going to have 3 seconds of when it could chase after someone, like sniff them out before it explodes. And then finally, we're going to increase its enemy detection radius from 12.5 units to 13.5 units. I think giving Auto Bomb more detection gives it something to work with. Not to mention it moves your opponents away from where they are. So instead of being in front of you, waiting for them to ambush you, you could just throw out your Auto Bomb and they could just move away, allowing you to move forward or allowing your team to move forward, which I think is nice right there. And after that, I think Auto Bomb will be fine. Alright, up to our special weapon changes. First up is Trizooka. So we're going to increase its blast radius that deals 53 damage from 2.5 units to 4 units. And then we're going to increase its splash damage from 53 to 55. We're going to increase its base duration by 1 second. We're going to increase the damage dealt to Big Bubbler by about 35%. We're going to increase its startup by 1/12 of a second, or by another 5 frames. And then we're going to rework the special to where the hit detection we adjusted the hit detection for the special, where hitting targets is now more consistent than before. Now, one of the complaints that people have against Trizooka is that the special is very inconsistent. So giving its original hitbox back is definitely nice, making it deal the same amount of damage that it did prior to 9.3, but of course increasing it to 55 makes the special more threatening, though at the same time it allows people to heal after, so they could take another Zuka hit. We're also going to increase its duration so people have more time to aim the shots. We're also going to increase its startup, so it's going to reduce the panic button factor. So here's the thing. if you decrease its duration, you're basically incentivizing people to panic the shots without even thinking. But if you increase the duration, but at the same time increase its startup, you have to make it's now going to be you have to be more careful when you fire the shots, which means you have to aim more, which I think is something that you have to keep in mind about. And not only that, we're adjusting the hit detection for hitting targets is more consistent. Is definitely a problem when you fire a shot at someone. Like if someone's in a certain position and you fire a Trizuka at them, it shows that the shots go right through them. So we're basically reworking the special to where the shots will now hit them instead of going through someone, which I think is nice right there. So these changes I think would make Zuka more consistent. Not to mention it could also bring it back to what it was prior to 9.3. All right, next up are changes to Inkjet. So we're going to increase its strafe speed by 10% when you're in the air. We're going to increase its base duration by half a second, reverting the nerf that it got in Splatoon 2. We're going to increase its 50 damage explosion radius by approximately 8%, going from 2.55 units to 2.75 units. We're going to increase its damage dealt to Big Bubbler by direct shots and explosions by about 35%. We're going to increase its exhaust damage by 40%, going from 0.5 per frame to 0.7 per frame. And then we're going to increase its direct hit damage from 120 to 150. Give Inkjet something to fight with, as well as make it more threatening for certain targets. So I think Inkjet could rise back up again, though at the same time, is it going to be meta? No. Is it going to be a better special? Yes. So I think these changes definitely would put Inkjet in a better position or in the spotlight more than where it is right now. All right, next up are changes to Triple Ink Strike, or to Tri-Strike as it's called. First up, we're going to increase its base duration by half a second, going from 6 seconds to 6.5 seconds. So we're going to give people more time to throw the markers in more strategic areas for maximum damage. We're going to rework the special. We adjusted the special to give it the ability to submerge when the special is in use. So basically, when you deploy the special, you now have the ability to submerge in your ink when the special is deployed, similar to when you're using Trizuka or Inkjet or Splatter Color Screen if the special is still in its canister, or even with Super Chump and Tacticooler. We're also going to decrease its damage radius by 3%, going from 7.7 units to 7.5 units. So the radius will be slightly smaller, though at the same time, Tri-Strike is still going to be threatening. So I think these changes are nice. I think Tri-Strike will be a little more balanced, and at the same time, it's going to have something to make it more viable or more bearable for some people. All right, next up are changes to Super Chump. So we're going to increase the number of chumps launched from 12 to 14. We're going to increase its HP per chump from 60 to 80, make it more tanky to deal with. Increasing the number of chumps I think is nice, so you have more to deal with. Decrease its base duration by 1 second, basically going from 10.5 seconds to 9.5 seconds. And then decrease the amount of time between the chumps falling and exploding by half a second. So going from 3.5 seconds to 3 seconds. So now you don't have much time to destroy the chumps. So you have to be quick. As soon as they hit the floor, you got to destroy them. Otherwise, they'll blow up in your face. So I think these changes will make chumps more threatening and a much better option, and something to use more in turf war and splat zones. Though they're still going to get outmatched by Triple Ink Strike, Booyah Bomb, and Tent Missiles. Though it makes Super Chump more viable. Alright, next up are the changes to Kraken Royale. So first, we're going to decrease its startup by 1/12 of a second, or by 5 frames. So its startup is now going to be 5 frames faster. We're going to increase its 60 damage radius by 8%. I asked a friend of mine how big the 60 damage radius was, and he said it was 2.65 units. So we're going to increase it from 2.65 units to 2.85 units. So it's going to be slightly bigger, making Kraken more of a threat when it's going after people with the jump attack. We're going to decrease the amount of time to finish charging up a charge attack by 3/60ths of a second, or by 3 frames, partially reverting the nerf that I got in 8.1. We're going to decrease its knockback while on the tower and tower control by 5%. It'll still have a large amount of knockback when it's on the tower, though it's going to be 5% less. And then we're going to adjust the special to give it the ability to super jump to any of its allies. We could also rework it to where you could deploy the special when you're super jumping. So by the time you hit the floor, you're fully transformed as the Kraken Royale, and giving your opponents the scare they'll never forget. As like, oh, they're waiting for, oh, let's get him. But as soon as you hit the floor, you're at Kraken Royale, and they're like, ah, shoot. So they're just going to be running like cockroaches, which I think that would be very threatening for Kraken. Give it that kind of power, it would definitely put Kraken over the edge. Though at the same time, it would make it more threatening without making it like broken. Alright, next up are changes to Tacticooler. So for this special, we're going to increase the drinks effect from 17 seconds to 18 seconds. It has been an issue for a while, given that the drinks effect wears off at the wrong time and you do not get the quick respawn effect. So making it last 1 second longer is nice, so you don't have to deal with that problem as much. We're also going to increase the max effect with special power up equipped from 25 seconds to 26 seconds. And then we're also going to rework it to after 3 seconds, the stand will disappear after all drinks have been taken to reduce visual clutter. So what that means is if all the drinks from the stand have been taken, the stand will disappear after 3 seconds to reduce visual clutter. And you're probably asking, will the cooldown disappear as well? No. The answer is no. The cooldown will still be in effect. It's just the stand will disappear to reduce visual clutter. So you don't have to focus on the stand as much. So you just focus on going after your opponents. And then decrease its cooldown time by half a second. So it'll go from 10 seconds to 9.5 seconds. And that's all that cooler will get, period. Alright, next up are changes to Ultra Stamp. So for this special, we're going to increase its base duration by half a second, partially reverting the nerf that I got in 4.0. And then we're going to adjust the sound effect when activating so we're going to rework the special to where the sound effect is more audible for opponents to hear when you activate it or when you deploy the special. So that's kind of like a nerf that Stamp got. Kind of like the same rework that Trizooka was given in 2.0. So Stamp will get the same nerf as Zuka in this case. So it's going to be easier for your opponents to hear it now and give it time to avoid it in case someone decides to throw the hammer. Next up are changes to Triple Splashdown. We're going to increase the HP for both fists from 100 to 150, so they're going to take more of a beating. We're going to increase the radius inked by the explosion when super jumping by approximately 30%. So when you super jump, the radius in which the explosion will be inking or painting, its paint radius will be 30% larger when you super jump, and then when you deploy the special and hit the floor, it's going to be 30% larger. And then we're going to decrease the amount of time it takes for this player and Ink Fist to start dropping after they rise up by 1/12 of a second or by 5 frames. So it's going to be 5 frames faster for you to rise up, for you and the fist to go in the air and then hit the floor. So it's going to be faster than before. So it's going to be slightly faster. And then finally is the change to Inkstorm. So for this special, we're going to increase the frequency with drops with which it inks the ground from 192 drops to 215 drops. So it's going to have more droplets to come out of the sky, out of the cloud. We're going to increase its drop paint radius from 1.9125 units to 2.01 units, so a nice paint buff. And then finally, we're going to increase its damage to Crab Tank by 5%. I think Inkstorm is going to be a lot more effective with it, given that it's going to have more droplets, it's going to have its paint radius, it's going to have a paint buff, its paint radius is going to be better, and it's going to deal a little more damage to Crab Tank, which it's now going to be better at area denial, as well as being able to flip the zone or have the other team lose control of the zone in Splat Zone. So I think the change for Inkstorm, very good. On to our points for special changes. 96 Gal Deca will go from 210 to 200 points for special. H3D will go from 200 to 190p, increasing its bubble output. Squeezer will go from 220 to 210, increasing its Zuka output. Given with Trizooka being toned back, we could make this happen. Foil Squeezer will get 200p, lowering its screen output. Classic Squiffer will go from 190 to 180, increasing its bubble output. New Squiffer will go from 200 to 190, increasing its Zipcaster output. Range Blaster and CRB will go down to 200p, increasing the output of both Wavebreaker and Kraken. Rapid Blaster Pro Winter will go down to 190p, increasing its cooler output. Ballpoint will go down to 200p, increasing its Inkjet output. Tri-Nouveau will go down to 200p, increasing its cooler output, and Tri-Slosh Ration will get 190p, lowering its screen output. The Sloshing Machine will get 210, increasing its Booyah Bomb output. Light Tetradoolies will get 180p, increasing its Zipcaster output. Dapple Dualies will be our next 160 weapon in Splatoon 3, increasing its cooler output even more, though it's still going to be outmatched by NZAP completely. Custom Douster Dualies will get 190p, increasing its Tri-Strike output. Undercover Sorella will get 170p, increasing its screen output. And then the Sticker Splatana Stamper will get 200p, lowering its Booyah Bomb output, putting it in a more balanced position. And for our last two weapons, Rapid Pro Deco will get 180p, increasing its Killer Whale output, and Rapid Deco will get 200p, increasing its Inkjet output. And that's all the changes for our points for special. And for our turf battle stages returning, I would like to see Salt Spray Rig return, and if it was, it would rarely undergo as many changes for turf war. Though looking at tower control, splat zones, Rainmaker, they'll undergo several changes or under several reworks, especially Clan Blitz being the new mode for Salt Spray Rig, since Salt Spray Rig was only in Splatoon 1. We could also keep the crane as well. That was the fun feature with it. And then we could also bring back the Reef. I doubt it will undergo some changes for Turf War, though it's going to be very minor if they were. And for Rainmaker and Tower Control, they could undergo several changes, especially for Splat Zones and Clan Blitz, making more accessible in certain areas, opening up strategic options. And yeah, that is it. That is all the changes for patch 10.2, for What If 10.2. You end up liking the video, consider subscribing. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.